All over Britain, in the spring, clean fresh water fills up with tadpoles. The best known are the tadpoles of the common frog, but they're not the only sort. Curled inside their transparent egg cases, the tadpoles of crested newts look like little fish. When they hatch, they look like little horrors. When their underwater existence comes to an end, all tadpoles graduate to a life on land. But it may not be true any longer to say that they have the best of both worlds. The rich green slime of a stagnant pond is an uninviting sight, especially when it's dotted with bits and pieces of our throwaway society's leftovers. A pond full of rusting metal, tin cans and old bedsteads is an eyesore, but such inorganic refuse doesn't harm the wildlife. Under the surface of some of the untidiest ponds is the home for half of the year of the amphibians, a group of animals which many people find as slimy and unattractive as the pond itself. Others can see the beauty of frogs and newts. To them, their ugliness is only skin deep. The crested newt is black and bumpy from head to toe, but in the mating season, the male develops a fine crest that would make a dragon green with envy. And his offspring, only half an inch long, look even more fearsome than their father. The first of the amphibia to start breeding are the frogs. Their year starts in February in southern Britain, when the males and females pair off for the protracted mating process. The male gets a firm grip of the female round the chest, and in that position they'll stay for an hour or more. With his fingers interlocked, he's impossible to shake off. Eventually, she'll discharge the mass of eggs which makes her abdomen so swollen, and at the same time, the male will release his sperm to fertilize them. The result is frog spawn, a jelly-like mass peppered with small black embryos. Frog spawn is so popular with school children to keep in a classroom aquarium that the very survival of the frog in Britain may be threatened. It has other problems too. They all add up to the fact that frog tadpoles are no longer as familiar a sight in spring as they once were. The development of a tadpole into a frog must be the best known and most often observed of all nature's miracles. Less well known is the intricate process which produces a new generation of newts. These are smooth newts, the more common kind. The male, darker colored with black spots, follows his chosen female, striking poses in front of her in a courtship ritual like an elaborate dance. Because of the way in which the newts mate, almost without physical contact, the correct performance of the dance by both members is very important. The length of time the male can spend in this strenuous display is limited by his need to breathe. If he abandons the female during the ritual to go to the surface for air, she'll be gone when he gets back. This is another reason why the partners must cooperate so as not to waste time. Eventually, they begin the second figure of the dance when she starts to follow him. His next move is to waft an attractive scent toward her through the water with his tail. The last stage begins when the female touches the male's tail with her nose. Then comes the most extraordinary event of all. The male produces a little bag of sperm, and the female follows him and picks it up in her cloaca. If the male has enough breath left, the whole performance will start again. The same pair may mate 3 or 4 times in one session. Their colour and the energetic behaviour of the male newts in the breeding season makes them too popular in freshwater aquaria and less common in the wild. When the mating ritual is finally completed, the male has nothing more to do. He will retreat to the surface for a breath of air, while the female begins laying her eggs. She lays them on the leaves of water plants with elaborate care. She inspects each leaf closely to make sure there's no egg there already. And then she rolls the leaf up with her hind feet, laying one of her eggs in the middle. Throughout March, April and May, each female lays 200 or 300 eggs, all with the same attention to detail. The egg is covered in a sticky substance which holds it to the leaf and glues the leaf safely round it to protect it from predatory fish. The females look as if they're attempting some daring gymnastic feat, but all they're really doing is ensuring the safety of the next generation, at least until the eggs hatch. Starting about a month later, the female crested newts lay their eggs. When all the eggs hatch, the pond will be packed with tadpoles. The newts have a straightforward, if somewhat grisly, solution to the problem of overcrowding, but for the time being, they seem to be concentrating on producing as many young as possible. For newts, as for most of the other lower animals, an individual life is not important, as long as the species carries on. This overproduction has evolved to make sure that at least some of the resulting babies will survive to adulthood. The eggs take about 4 weeks to hatch, shorter in warmer weather. As the embryo develops inside, a development outside the eggs will make their early life easier for the baby newts. The water fleas are hatching to become an important source of food for the newt tadpoles. Soon the eggshell clears and the baby, looking very like a tiny fish, 1/3 of an inch long, can be seen inside. The first smooth newt tadpoles hatch in April, followed a month later by the first crested newts. They find themselves in a world alive with food, hopping with water fleas. The tadpoles don't have to surface for air. They breathe through their gills, like a pink ruff round their necks. They will soon find that the water contains not only prey, but predators as well. Beneath the surface of a quiet pool in late spring lies a world of violence and death for the tadpoles that have hatched there. What looks like a delicate little plant is hydra, the freshwater anemone. Its slender arms are loaded with stinging cells, and in its own small way, it's just as deadly as some of its relatives, the poisonous jellyfish. While the tadpoles are tiny, hydra is a serious threat to their survival. Already, the massive overproduction of the breeding season is being absorbed by the ecosystem of the pond. Hydra isn't the only animal that eats tadpoles. The pond is filling up with carnivorous larvae, among them the offspring of Dytiscus, the diving beetle. It's well equipped to catch moving prey, even fish. Although the fish can usually escape, the tadpoles are often not quick enough to evade those fearsome jaws. Near the surface, the beetle larva makes life dangerous for the tadpoles of frogs and newts alike. On the bottom of the pool, dragonfly larvae lurk near the cover of weeds and pebbles. If the tadpoles keep to the open parts of the pond bottom, they're exposed to the grisliest predator of them all. To the unprejudiced eye, the water scorpion Renatra is a very beautiful animal. It looks and behaves more like a praying mantis than a scorpion, with its grasping arms and piercing beak, and it's an avid hunter of tadpoles. For its victims, Renatra's first embrace will be the last, as its proboscis sucks out the tadpole's body fluids. To frogs and newts in general, such predation is actually a long-term benefit. It weeds out the slower, less active individuals, keeping up the standards for the next generation. Beetle and dragonfly larvae and water scorpions take their toll of the tadpoles, but they have other enemies within their own ranks. They eat each other. A large tadpole sees a smaller tadpole not as a younger sibling, but as a nourishing meal. Consequently, the small tadpoles are very wary little creatures indeed. Of the 300 eggs that a female smooth newt might produce in a season, only 2%, that's 6, will grow up to leave the water for the land. The rest will die in the egg or as tadpoles. The gluttonous cannibalism of the older newts in the pond will eventually reduce the overcrowding to manageable proportions, with just the biggest, quickest and strongest tadpoles left to carry on the race. Soon it'll be time for all the survivors, newts and frogs alike, to leave the water for the next phase of their life, in the air. The frogs will be the first to go, breaking through the surface of the pond, which has been their ceiling for so long. Above lurks a different kind of predator, hunting not for them, but for newts. Children have been fishing for newts in Britain for centuries. They're not very difficult to catch. There's no hook involved. It's a matter of patience. The angler has only to wait until the newt has a good grip on the worm. Striking too soon can lead to disappointment, but the newt seems quite willing to try again. Being captured doesn't harm a newt, provided it soon moved to more spacious quarters from the traditional jam jar in which its imprisonment starts. Even when it's transferred from the jam jar to swim safely in a roomy aquarium, the newt should be watched closely for signs of molting. The roll of dead skin around its neck shows that it will soon be ready to leave the water. When the molt is complete, the old skin drifts away, looking like the ghost of its former owner. It won't be wasted. Like all the tadpoles that hatched in the spring only to be eaten by their elders, the discarded skin will drop back into the energy chain, perhaps via some of the tiny organisms that will eventually provide a meal for one of the next spring's water fleas. After 98% of them have died or been killed, these are the pick of the season's crop of young amphibians. Each pair of adults has produced, on average, only 6 offspring. This is a very slow rate of recruitment. The froglets soon lose their tails. They no longer need the underwater equipment of a fish. Their gills have gone too, and their lungs have started working. Most important of all, they now have to catch their food. At first, the froglet must concentrate on tiny insects. As it grows bigger, it can take larger prey. It'll need agility and good eyesight to find a living. Unlike the almost blind tadpole, which used to find its food by scent at the bottom of the pond, the frog on land needs to be able to see well and clearly. It must also be able to move fast when the occasion demands. Quick movement not only enables the froglet to catch prey, it helps it to avoid becoming the prey of its seniors. A full-grown adult is nearly 10 times the size of a newly emerged frog. If it's to grow up, the youngster must be ready to jump at a moment's notice. Not all common frogs are green. People have bred ornamental varieties in shades of orange and yellow. The little crested newts, when they emerge in August, don't have to evade their potential predators quite so carefully. They have a secret weapon. The crested newt produces an irritating chemical from its skin, which makes any animal that gets it into its mouth spit it out at once. The taste deters it from attacking any more newts. Armed with their chemical weapons, or just their agility, the young amphibians begin their life on land. The newly emerged newts will stay ashore now for 4 years, until they reach maturity and go back to the water to breed. In early August, captured newts should be released, preferably in a damp place near where they were caught, to avoid reducing the wild population. For the adults, the land is a safe haven from the winter frosts. The smooth newts lead the way as usual, and the crested newts follow a week or 2 later, at the end of August. The rapid fluttering of the newt's throat shows that the transition from water to air involves a considerable physical effort. Since an amphibian doesn't have a diaphragm, it has to force air into its lungs with a pumping apparatus in the floor of its mouth. Without water to buoy it up, a newt finds life on land slow and heavy at first, and full of disappointment. Once they're ashore, the newts disperse across damp fields or along hedgerows until the cold weather sets in. Then they look for a sheltered place to hibernate, under a log or in the bottom of a hedge. Crossing an open field is an arduous journey for a newt in search of cover as the days grow shorter. Eventually, they'll all disappear from sight, to tick over slowly until the spring. If they're disturbed during the winter, newts are sluggish and unsteady on their feet. Perhaps an intoxicated human reminded someone once of just such a sleepy, stumbling creature. In ponds and ditches, a few tadpoles will be left to hide as best they can, to develop into adults the following spring, if they survive. Very few of them do. It's not just the cold weather. Many of Britain's ponds have been drained or poisoned by agricultural chemicals. The few that can support amphibians have been raided, until most of the frogs and newts have gone. Now a new threat is sweeping slowly across Britain from the southeast. A virus is killing the remaining frogs. No one knows how it's transmitted or how it might be controlled. The only hope is to give the frogs and the other amphibians every chance by keeping their habitat clean and by releasing captives in time for them to hibernate. The amphibians might seem to be doomed, but they have a sanctuary which is growing year by year. The majority of frogs and newts in Britain breed as welcome guests in ponds in people's gardens. If only the virus can be contained, or if it dies out on its own, these clean and pleasant surroundings will be an ideal home for the fascinating, if rather slimy creatures. Then they might well be said to have the best of both worlds.
While Britain's back on Tuesday night at 8, focusing on the mulberry bush.